G'day, and welcome to another episode of Ian Smissen's Photography. Hi, I'm back in my hotel room after another day at a conference in Adelaide. Last night after the conference I went out to the Torrens River and shot some of the Adelaide Skyline and the reflections in the river from just in front of the Adelaide Oval. I had the idea of photographing a stitched panorama and getting the sunset with the yellowy glow of the sun just behind the city skyline in the west. Unfortunately, just before sunset, a bank of cloud rolled in and really blocked the sun as it was setting, so there was no great change in colour. But I tried another few different compositions in different places from around the same area, and they really didn't work either. I just couldn't find anything that I was really satisfied with. But about half an hour after the sun had set, in the blue hour, as the sun started to drop below the horizon, the glow in the back of those clouds became pinker, and the bluey sky merged into a magenta against those clouds at the same time that the city building lights were coming on. So the message here is that if you persist long enough, you'll eventually find something. So I hope you enjoy this video. A few fails along the way, but a nice image that I'm happy with at the end. G'day, I'm in Adelaide, down here on the river, just north of the city. I'll pan around and you can see the city skyline behind me, and if I swing back 180 degrees, you can see the Adelaide Oval and this footbridge just leading back across the river into the city. I'm going to have a go at seeing if I can catch the sunset just setting behind the city, and hopefully we get a little bit of cloud. There's not much there at the moment. I hope there's a little bit of cloud that gets some colour in it as the sun sets, but if not, we'll try a bit of a golden hour, blue hour combination. This might be a panorama or it might be just a single shot. We'll see what we can get. I'm set up here now with the Pentax K1 and the Pentax 24 to 70mm f2.8 lens. 24 millimeters horizontally isn't quite wide enough to get this whole shot in, and if I put a wider lens on, like the 20mm Voigtlander lens I have, it's going to get a lot of the bridge railing and things in the foreground, and that doesn't really that's just going to be cropped out anyway. So it's going to end up being a panoramic shot, and to get a better quality image for that, I'm going to turn the camera over, as I said, into vertical and take a multi-shot panorama. So the best thing to do for this is to start by leveling the base of the tripod head, and I can do this using this leveling tool here that has a little spirit level here, and if I turn around over here, I can set that so that the tripod head is level. And then I can use the level in the viewfinder on the camera on the LCD screen to get the camera level. So that means when I pan, if I undo this and I can now pan the camera side to side, the horizon is going to stay straight, and I don't end up sort of tipping down on either side. All right, I'm set up here, ready to take this series of shots. There's a fair bit of difference between the brightest and the darkest areas in this shot, so I'm going to bracket each shot by 2 stops under to 2 stops over, which will give me a greater contrast range to deal with. And I can either choose to blend those manually or use HDR software to blend those when I get them back on the computer. The other thing to remember is when you've got a wide contrast range across a scene that's shooting a panorama, is to switch the camera to manual, because if you leave it on an automatic setting, it will automatically adjust the exposure to try and keep the exposure the same. whereas what we want to do is to have an even blend across this entire image. So it's slightly brighter on the right hand side from the left hand side, and I want to make sure that the final image looks like it's brighter on the right hand side. So I'm going to go and take these shots now, and you'll see the result hopefully when I'm done. Now I'm looking here at the back of the camera, having taken the first of these frames with the 5 shots. This is the 2 stops over shot, and you can see how much overexposed it is. So that's not going to be terribly useful to me. There's nothing in that image that I will actually use. Even the sort of darker spots in the green are really very light. So I'm going to drop the average exposure here by a stop. So I'm going to go from -3 to +1, and then I'll take the series. All right, I'm going to put a neutral density filter on now to slow down the shutter speed, to flatten out the water. And to do that, first of all, I have to put this adapter on. And you'll notice here that I don't have the circular polarizer. If you saw my last video, I used the circular polarizer to polarize the water and cut the reflections off. That might be useful here for a while, but once we get into the sunset light, there's not going to be much of a reflection here, and I want to keep the reflection if there is one. The other thing with the polarizer is that it differentially changes the colour of the sky across a wide angle shot, and because I'm taking this panoramic shot, I've got quite a width of sky, and it's going to have a different effect. So I'll end up with a very dark blue on one side and a light blue on the other side, and it just looks unnatural, and it's unnecessary to try and fix that in post-production. Well, the sun's just gone down. There's a low cloud bank that's come up over the western sky, so I'm not sure we're going to get a lot of colour. But I'm just starting to take another sequence here, and I'll just turn that around about 15 degrees and take another shot. I'm shooting this at 10-second exposure with the noise reduction setting for slow shutter speeds turned on as well, which means it turns into 20 seconds to take each shot. And as I'm taking about 8 shots across there, that's going to be nearly 3 minutes to take the shot. Now that can be a challenge if you take anything much longer than that, because the light drops quite quickly at this time of night. So by the time you've finished the shot, the exposure's not as good as it could have been, but we'll see what we get. Well, that didn't do much for me, so I've moved over to the other side of the bridge and are now looking at the south gate of the Adelaide Oval. And since they've done the redevelopment here, there's a really nice curve to the roof line with some of these eucalypt trees and some bright television screens in front. So I'm going to switch over to video here and give you a look to see what this is doing. And you can see that the sky is quite bright in comparison with the foreground, and those television screens are very bright in comparison with the rest of that midground in the dark windows on the stadium. So I'm going to take this as an HDR shot and see if we can process it up to balance out the differences in light. Well, the sunset didn't really come, and I'm going to give this another shot looking the other way down the river towards the bridge on King William Road, and get this sweeping curve of the riverbank along with the path and the lights coming in from the bottom left and curving around to the bridge. I'm going to drop this down to a very slow shutter speed, 2.5 minutes, something like that, to get the water really flattened out and the reflections on there. So let's see what we get. Alright, it's now about half an hour after sunset, so good blue hour light, good reflections on the river, not a lot of lights on in the buildings, but some of them are well lit up. So I'm going to take one more panorama to see what we can get. At this time of night I don't need any filters on the front of the lens. I'm shooting this at ISO 100, f11, 13 seconds. And that should be about right. I might have one or two goes at it, but we'll see how it goes. This is going to take me probably 10 minutes to take the full sweep, because each 13-second shot will then take another 13-second dark shot to subtract the noise out of that, and then you've got to move around through the sort of somewhere between 6 and 8 frames. So we'll show you what it looks like when we're done.